Do our religious leaders have answers in this time of crisis?
We must safeguard the integrity of business and of professional ethics.
We need more ethics in economy because some people are just taking money and they have no ethical attitude, nothing, just money.
Do they feel that God himself is under attack?
God can look after himself, and even he enjoys, I am sure, reading the adverts on the buses.
Quite a number of alternative adverts could be put on buses. Perhaps improbably God does exist.
When religion dies, something in our world of relationships dies with it.
5 prominent religious thinkers speak frankly about God, faith, doubt, their vision for Britain, and the life to come.
My concept of hell, I suppose, is being stuck with myself forever, and with no way out.
According to a recent survey, nearly 4 people out of 10 in Britain believe in God. Another 40% unsure, but do profess to believe in some kind of spirit or life force. A surprisingly small minority in secular Britain, just 1 person in 5, believes there's nothing out there at all. No God, no spirit, no life force. Creation is a huge and rather splendid accident. To address those doubters and waverers, we invited religious leaders and prominent religious thinkers in Britain to answer fundamental questions about their faith and beliefs. Dr. Rowan Williams, Archbishop of Canterbury, leader of the established Church of England and the worldwide community of over 70 million Anglicans.
Honor and glory are yours, O loving Father, forever and ever.
We began with the most important question of all. How do you know that God exists?
I think I prefer to talk about being confident that God exists or trusting that God exists. It's not knowing as you know a state of affairs in the world. It's much more a sense that you're in the presence of something greater than you can conceive. And I suppose from my teens I've just been aware of that something greater than I can put words to, in whose presence I live and think and act.
Sir Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi and leader of the Orthodox Jewish community in Britain.
You judge an idea by what it does to people who embrace that idea or are embraced by it. And so I saw God in terms of the people in whom I sensed his presence.
Vincent Nichols, the newly appointed Archbishop of Westminster and leader of the Roman Catholic Church in this country.
Beyond all the distress of this world, beyond all the breakup of family life, beyond all the things that unbalance us, there is a Father, there is a figure who has our fate in his hands. And we can approach God through the person of Jesus, through the crucified Saviour.
In Islam, there is no clear hierarchy, no British equivalent of an archbishop or a chief rabbi who can speak on behalf of Britain's 2.25 million Muslims. So we approached Professor Tariq Ramadan.
20 seconds.
A prolific lecturer, writer and broadcaster, he is also one of Europe's leading Islamic thinkers.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and mixing cue.
Today we are going to discuss the concept of justice in Islam. I really deeply believe that God exists. the world, the creation, all the things are signs. So it's a relationship between what my heart is feeling and my eyes are seeing and my mind is understanding.
If it's hard to defend the proposition that one person can speak on behalf of British Muslims, it is even harder when it comes to Britain's 750,000 Hindus. Hinduism has been described as a family of many different religions and sects, each with its own practices and beliefs. From among the holy men or sadhus of the Swaminarayan sect, we approach Sadhu Paramtattvadas, who has spent half his life studying and reflecting on the Hindu faith.
Quite simply, God is the highest, the purest, most transcendental, perfect being there is.
But how do you know he even exists?
It's faith. It's faith. It really is as simple and as powerful as that.
You take God on trust?
Yes.
For thousands of years, man believed this earth was the center of God's creation. Beyond the sun and stars that orbited around us was the kingdom of heaven, physically close, so close, Jesus tells us in the Gospels, that God has counted the hairs on our heads and knows when every sparrow falls. We now know that this Earth, indeed our entire solar system, is a mere speck at the edge of a galaxy that contains over 200 billion stars. Even if we could travel at the speed of light, it would take us 2 million years to reach the next galaxy. Is it really possible that the creator of this vast universe can have a direct, personal relationship with you and with me?
Yes, in a word, because the difference between us and God is not that we're very small and he's very big. Christians have always held, and Jews and Muslims too, that God is absolutely present in every bit of the creation, that his energy, if you like, is at work in every act within the universe. We may be very small, but we and everything else are still in the palm of God's hand.
God pervades his entire creation. That means he is everywhere, in every being, in everything, in animals, in every aspect of nature, in the rivers, in the oceans, in the jungles, everywhere. He's all around us.
Have there ever been moments when your faith was tested?
Challenges, certainly. Every day, in fact. Some of the most soulful prayers and some of the most deep personal reflection can happen in response to these doubts. And they can, in fact, be not an enemy of faith, but a reinforcer.
There have certainly been moments of strain in faith. Times of bereavement, times when I've been very, very conscious of somebody else's deep suffering.
Have there ever been moments when your faith was tested?
Plenty. I think doubt is an intrinsic part of faith. I doubt if we're ever free of it. As a youngster on the pathway to ordination, there were times when I was very close to walking out and thinking, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, I don't believe all this anyway.
You actually felt God calling you, and still you resisted.
I do remember very vividly standing amid probably a crowd of 50,000 people at Anfield one particular Saturday afternoon, and just kind of calling out to God, leave me alone, let me be one in the crowd. Let me just lose myself in this crowd, and I do not want this.
What keeps your faith alive? What continues to feed it?
I think the testimony of so many good people, most of whom are not in the public eye, most of whom are hidden away, but their goodness is contagious.
On the night he was betrayed, he took bread and gave you thanks and praise.
And also I think my own life of faith, the great privilege of celebrating Mass, of being at the centre of the liturgy of the Church, where we stand before God, and having this immense privilege of the priesthood. Christ uses my voice to speak his words. He uses my hands to make his actions. And that is something that every day fills me with a grateful wonder as well. So my own experience of faith is real and at times very encouraging, very fruitful.
In Jesus, Christians have an image of God the Son. But God the Father, Yahweh, Allah, the Supreme Creator, cannot be described or even imagined by any of our great religious thinkers. But he wasn't always so remote. The God of the Torah and the Bible was physically close. He could appear on the road, engage in one-to-one dialogue with his prophets. And, as the Bible tells us, and Christian artists have depicted, man is made in his image. For Orthodox Jews and Muslims, any representation of God is blasphemous.
And in the Islamic tradition, we have names, 99 names, helping us to understand the way he acts, the way he behaves, but not who he is as a description. So he is full of mercy, he is very close, he is full of compassion, but you cannot define him and you cannot have a representation. And I think it's quite important.
So he's really indescribable.
Indescribable, yes.
Whatever the great religious scholars may think or say, millions of their followers cannot relate to an abstraction or even understand what it means. They need someone to worship who has human form. Christians have Jesus Christ, God made flesh. But even among Christians, there's often a need for more, for Mary, the mother of Jesus, and a whole pantheon of saints and martyrs, people with stories behind them, whose status is almost divine. Among Hindus, this desire is even stronger.
One of the most common misconceptions of Hinduism is that Hindus worship multiple gods. In fact, most Hindus believe and worship one supreme reality. But in accepting one supreme reality, we also acknowledge and accept other lesser divinities, which we call devtas.
They come here to worship Swami Narayan, who founded this sect in the early 1800s. He's flanked on either side by his most dedicated disciples, not dressed as in this life, but for the glorious life to come. The founders share this space with the gods of the ancient Hindu epics. Hanuman, the monkey-headed god who symbolizes heroism and valor in the fight for righteousness. Ganesh, decapitated in a moment of rage by his father Shiva and restored by him to life with the head of the first creature that passed by, an elephant. According to those who worship here, each icon represents an aspect of the Supreme Creator. When you stand before Swami Narayan, Ganesh, Shiva, in the temple, you feel you're in the presence of the divine.
Yes, absolutely. All these images were consecrated in a special Vedic ceremony, richly infused with the presence of God. So these images no longer remain stone or metallic statues, they become murtis, sacred. So in coming to God, meeting him, standing in front of him, and seeing him with love and reverence and devotion, we are necessarily being seen by him. and thus being blessed. It's a very enriching experience for the devotees.
So as you stand there, God is observing you.
Absolutely.
And these are not statues, they're a living presence.
Yes, we believe God actually is present in these images.
Here, as in churches, mosques and synagogues, one senses the power of religious faith. What it means to belong to a community of believers, to know that God cares for each and every one of us, and above all, to have the assurance that after all the sufferings and disappointments of this life, death is not the end.
We come from God and we return to God. There's a Sikh leader in Birmingham who spoke to me once very beautifully about this pilgrimage through life. And he said, when a child is born, it cries. And one understanding of that cry is that by being born, the child is now separated from the mystery of God. And those tears will continue in one form or another until that person is again reunited with God.
I really believe, and this is a profoundly Jewish insight, that I'd rather concentrate on life down here than life up there. I am sure that God will show me what I need to know when I need to know it, but not a minute before.
But the moment when the body dies is not the end of your existence.
No. We are more than physical beings, and everything about us should tell us so.
All I really know about the afterlife is that God has promised to be there. God has promised that death is not a point where he wipes his hands and says, all right, I've done with you.
Hindus believe in an immortal, immutable soul. That means it's on an eternal journey, an illuminating journey, and it passes through many life forms. In each life form, it takes on a different body according to its karma. And in each life, it's given the opportunity to develop spiritually with the ultimate aim to be liberated from this perpetual cycle of births and deaths.
You're now a sadhu. Where will your spirit go when you die?
The soul, with spiritual endeavors and with the grace of God, will leave this body and ultimately enter the abode of God.
Can you put into words what that experience must be like?
A place of eternity, a place of bliss, a place of calmness. No desires, being engulfed in peace and serenity.
Forever.
Forever.
Next, we ask searching questions about the role of religion in contemporary Britain. Is religious faith important in preserving close bonds of family and community? Can people of faith really point us to a better world? What is the value of religion in contemporary Britain? A Catholic church in North London. Vincent Nichols, the new Archbishop of Westminster, is here to celebrate communion. 50 years ago, packed churches were commonplace. Since then, attendance has fallen dramatically, except for very special occasions. Have we lost something in consequence? What do religions, all religions, have to offer that could make Britain a better place?
The body of Christ.
Religions are very good at binding people together in communities. Family is a kind of bedrock. Judaism is a religion of the family. Many of our most sacred rituals take place in the family.
This is the bread of affliction, which our fathers ate in the land of Egypt.
We break them.
An Orthodox Jewish family celebrates the Passover Seder.
When the Egyptians were chased
This ritual commemorates the deliverance of God's chosen people for whom the seas were parted and their enemies destroyed.
It is a very characteristic Jewish idea that faith is transmitted from generation to generation in the context of family and home. We are saying, here is our story. Make this yours.
We came out of Egypt 3,300 years ago.
Wow. Rabbi Eliezer, a story is told to Rabbi Yeshua, the scholar of old.
When religion dies in a society, we see that it affects relationships, bonds of love, what I call covenantal bonds. And those two great institutions that rest on these covenantal bonds are marriage and the family, and community and congregation. So when religion dies, something in our world of relationships dies with it.
Is this the root of so many of our problems? That we have let religion die?
Our politics is reviled, our parliament is held in scorn, our people have had enough.
Bankrupt, the maelstrom of rumour and fear sweeps the global financial system.
In America, you will actually find the cops turning up with a pair of handcuffs and carting people away.
Effigy of a banker tied to a lamppost and set on fire.
How many more families like ours will have to stand outside the Old Bailey to get justice for their child? Knife crime is now sadly embedded in the very heart of Great Britain.
Britain has the highest rate of teenage pregnancy in Western Europe.
The judge catalogued every one of the horrific injuries that baby P had suffered. A missing tooth, a missing fingernail, a broken back.
Can people of faith really lead us to a better world?
What I think people of faith offer is a sense of accountability. You know, I mean, we are relating to a being who was there before the universe existed, will be there long after it ceases to be. He has entrusted us with aspects of his creation. Therefore, we as religious people must safeguard the environment for the sake of future generations. We must safeguard the integrity of business and of professional ethics and of our standards in finance and banking if we are to preserve the heritage of trust without which no society can function at all.
We need more ethics in economy because some people are just taking money and they have no ethical attitude, nothing, just money, just, trying to get it. So we need in all the way we deal with ecology, global warming. The world is, the universe, the creation is telling us if you carry on acting, behaving like this with nature, you are going to destroy nature and yourself.
But who's leading the fight against the desecration of the environment, greed, the collapse of the economy? I don't feel the impulse comes from religious leaders.
No, it doesn't. It didn't and it doesn't. And you're completely right on this. But now you have Christians and Jews and more Muslims being involved in the process. And this is where we can meet. Different roots, same concerns.
What's the Anglican message in the present crisis?
That your value as a human being does not depend on possession, control, acquisition. It's there in the Gospels, Jesus' famous parable of the rich man who builds all his barns and buildings, and God says, "You idiot, you're going to die tonight."
These are powerful and important messages, but do you think anybody out there is actually listening to you?
The church doesn't have very much of a clear voice in the media very often. It's perceived by a lot of people as conflict-ridden and obsessed with housekeeping matters. And yet, what strikes me again and again is how people say they want to hear from the church. They want to have some vision held up before them of what humanity in the eyes of God looks like.
By the intercession of the Archangel Michael, who stands at the right hand of the altar of incense, may the Lord deign to bless this offering.
As with all the great religions and denominations, the difficulty the Anglican Church has in getting any clear message across is division, cultural and theological. From ultra-high church to evangelical, from radical to conservative, from the city of London to Soweto, all nominally within the same Anglican fold, but with vastly different values. One particular issue has created the biggest crisis in the Church since the Reformation.
God created Adam and Eve. He did not create Adam and Steve. I'm not okay with the gay priests who are given the pulpit.
This then is the issue that has split the Church apart, giving an archbishop who has commended stable same-sex relationships the unenviable task of keeping the factions together. You once said that an archbishop shouldn't behave like the leader of a party, pronouncing on what's right and wrong. What matters to you is holding the Church together. But isn't that leading you into all kinds of moral compromises?
When I said that an archbishop is not the leader of a party, I meant not that an archbishop has no convictions or shouldn't speak about them. It means that there are always going to be some priorities that I hold personally that I can't push from where I sit.
The trouble with this sensitivity to the opinions of all factions within the Church is that it creates paralysis.
We long to see the consecration of women bishops in our Church.
Decades after society has recognised a woman's right and ability to do virtually any job, including that of Prime Minister, the Anglican Church is still wrestling with the issue of women bishops.
The Church has got to try and solve this in its own terms. And yes, that does take longer, and it can be embarrassing sometimes. You look at society around and you realise people don't fully understand why the Church is taking so long and what the terms are in which the Church is trying to sort it out.
Where do our moral values really come from? I mean, was there ever a time when religious values predominated and this was a better society?
I don't think there's a golden age back there. And I don't think that the Christianity as it has been lived in the history of this country has automatically produced an order which everyone universally would recognize as wonderful.
And that's the problem. There may be a lot wrong with our society, but we don't burn heretics at the stake, condone torture or slavery. We don't hang a child for stealing a loaf of bread. Capital punishment has been abolished altogether, and we have laws to protect people against discrimination on grounds of race, gender, or sexual orientation. Who has given the moral lead for all these changes? The Church?
Oh, well, I would be very foolish to say it's all come from the Church, wouldn't I? It hasn't. But I would happily say that the best of our human endeavour for the improvement of our human lot, then I would say that's the work of the Holy Spirit.
Does the concept of the human spirit, you know, the capacity to do good without any input from above, does that have any meaning for you?
Yes, it does. The human spirit is crucially important and much in evidence. It inspires compassion, forgiveness, self-sacrifice. I think, to me, the key phrase in St. Paul is when he says, our spirit and God's spirit bear united witness that we are indeed children of God.
Does one need religion to be ethical? I mean, can't an atheist have moral values?
Well, clearly lots of atheists do have moral values, very impressive ones. My only question to them is where exactly do they get them from? I think there's something much, much more profound in the universe that pushes us towards a moral perspective on life, which is the presence and action of God in all things. And that's why I would say that the atheist, like it or not, is, if you like, benefiting from the effects of that.
So you reject the idea that the impulse to do good is something that can exist within us without divine direction?
I think it's the capacity is there. The extent to which that capacity, if you like, is activated by God is beyond my judgment.
But God's values, as interpreted by the Church, can sometimes seem perverse, even amoral. Manila, capital of the Philippines, a desperately poor Catholic country where the population has doubled in the last 30 years. In this one-room shack, a mother of 9 survives on $1 a day.
Danica, Danny Boy, Marlon, Junek.
She says she wanted no more than 3 children, but the Catholic Church forbids the use of contraception, and abortion is a mortal sin. In Kenya, someone dies of AIDS every couple of minutes. At least 1/5 of Kenyans have the HIV virus that causes AIDS, and when your loved one dies in Nairobi, this is where you come. The World Health Organization actively promotes condoms for HIV prevention. The Catholic Church forbids them.
We have things like condom, and me, I can't use condom.
This Catholic man is infected, his wife is not. But the nurse from the only local hospital, a Catholic hospital, can't offer protection, only platitudes.
They may keep praying, because now there's nothing they can do about it. He's already sick. If the wife has accepted the situation, then they may live, continue to love each other, be faithful to one another, until the last day on earth.
In the face of this reality, is it right to forbid the use of condoms, either as a form of birth control or as protection against HIV?
I think I would want to say that condoms don't lack their advocates. There are plenty of people who are doing that. And I don't know, you will know better than I, but my impression is that they're well available in places. I think the deeper point that the Church wants to make is, in a phrase, to keep sexuality as profoundly human.
A cardinal supervises the ceremonial burning of condoms and safe-sex literature. What shapes Catholic and Protestant evangelical attitudes to sexuality, particularly in relation to abortion and stem cell research, is the idea that the human embryo is endowed with an immortal soul at the moment of conception. But most embryos never implant in the womb. They're naturally expelled from the body and die, meaning that heaven must be mostly populated by people who never existed. Does that make any sense?
I quite understand that many moments of embryonic conception do not come to fulfillment. But the prudent position, it seems to me, is to say that's when the mystery begins.
Dogma that seems to ignore the reality of the human condition is serious enough. Even more alarming is a rising tide of fanaticism and murder committed in the name of religion. Since the fall of communism, virtually all the great conflicts of our time are, at root, religious conflicts. Men, it's usually men, claim God-given authority to suspend all the rules of human decency and to massacre, mutilate, and terrorize in God's name. How can people of faith like you change the perception that religion is irrational and violent?
Yes, I think you're right. What we are facing now is really a perception that religions are responsible and religious people responsible of atrocities and violence. Use of religions to kill people, to kill innocent people, and to promote a kind of us versus them. The dogmatic minds. This is where we have to struggle. So there is coming back to the essence of your religion and being able to face the people from your own religious community who are betraying the very essence of your religion.
Religion is one of the most powerful forces in human life, and all powerful forces can be used for good or for ill and for harm. And I do believe that God right now is setting us the most serious challenge we have ever been set. He has given us many faiths, but only one world in which to live together. And unless we as religious individuals can meet that challenge, no shift of perception is even going to be relevant. We must somehow find a way of seeing the trace of God in the face of a stranger.
And if we fail, Are we to expect more and more of this? 19 men on a mission of mass murder in the name of their faith and in the certainty of their reward in the life to come. And out of the smoke and dust, a remarkable image, the New York Fire Brigade chaplain being carried out of the wreckage, dead in a chair.
He was this man. He'd gone in this building with the men to whom he was the priest. He was their chaplain. And he'd given his life alongside of them as they fought against this terrible atrocity, committed in the name of religion.
So hard to fathom. Muslim and Christian sacrificing their lives that same morning. Some to kill, others to save, and both equally certain that God was on their side. And that has been the pattern of religious conflict throughout history.
For 1,000 years, Jews trembled at the word Christian. And I have to say, with pain, that the Jewish experience of Christian Europe was, for nearly 1,000 years, a very tragic experience. It added words to the vocabulary, words like expulsion, inquisition, forced conversion, auto-da-fé, ghetto, and pogrom.
As you look back over the history of the Church, from the Inquisition to the recent scandals, what do you feel?
I was very taken, as I'm sure many people were, when just before the millennium, Pope John Paul held this ceremony of reconciliation and forgiveness in St. Peter's. He knelt before a crucifix and held before the Lord his view of the failings of the Church. He talked about the Inquisition, and he included any use of force in the cause of truth. He included and the betrayal of the trust that had been placed in the Church. That's an important moment, and I think it's something that, in a very small scale, the Catholic community does at the beginning of every Mass. When we gather to pray, our first act is to confess our sins. And we, in Catholic tradition, always understand the Church to be a church of sinners. That's why I have a place in it.
In the final part, we look at the challenges facing those who believe that religious faiths rooted in ancient texts can be relevant for all time. The great religions are rooted in sacred texts, still regarded by many as the timeless revelation of God and the source of all knowledge. They were revealed to ancient societies living between 1500 and 3500 years ago, and they contain much that reflects the moral values and the state of knowledge of their time. The question that seems to be tearing all the great